pleased to participate in this debate on Bill S-3. As has been clearly stated, this is a very important issue. It's one issue of many dealing with the ocean's ecosystem and issues of conservation and stock management that needs to be seriously considered. But let me say that this bill is it's been suggested that it's a piece of housekeeping legislation, and it is meant to help ratify the agreement, the Port State Measures Agreement that was signed at the UN back in 2010. Now, this government decided by way of ratifying for its part, it's got to be ratified by 25 nations before it will come into effect. And you would think that Canada, with the longest coastline of any country in the world, would show some urgency, and having such an important fishery on all our coasts, including in the Arctic, would show some leadership on this issue and would underline the problem by bringing it forward with some urgency and with some import. But what they've done is they introduced it through the Senate. They introduced it. Many of us have suggested that introducing legislation through the Senate is like introducing it through the back door. It indicates that the government, thinks it's something that should be dealt with. It's not, but it's clearly not wholly important. It's not something that they want to bog down their agenda. So the bill was dealt with in March of 2013 by the Senate, passed third reading in March, was ready to come here, but then the government, the Conservative government, in their wisdom in the fall, decided to prorogue the House, which meant that legislation died on the table. So then it had to go back through the Senate again. Then it was S-13. Then it had to be reintroduced into the Senate as S-3, and now here we are in September of 2014. The bill hasn't even passed second reading. Undoubtedly, it will later on this afternoon. But to me, as a legislator, it certainly does not indicate to me that the government is taking this issue seriously enough. The whole question of illegal, unreported, unregulated fishery, Mr. Speaker, has been estimated that we're talking about tens of billions of dollars in economic value that is being lost as a result of the practice of countries around the world, of nations around the world, taking stocks, taking fish, and treating it or selling it, and challenging, undermining other regulated markets. But it's something that's been going on, frankly, for centuries. There's no doubt that the IUU fishery it does threaten ocean ecosystems and sustainable fisheries. It violates conservation and management measures, Mr. Speaker, things like quotas and bycatch limits. And that's important, and it's important to recognize that there is an attempt internationally to try to control how the signatory countries, the fishing countries, go about fishing these stocks. We have a lot of science here in this country, although if this government gets reelected, there may not be any left. But there's lots of work being done around the world in terms of trying to monitor stocks and monitor their patterns and their health to determine the levels at which fisheries, individual fisheries, should be prosecuted so that the fishery is sustainable. If you then allow, hundreds of thousands, millions of tons of fish under those measures to then be taken out of the water, Mr. Speaker, without any control, then it defeats the purpose. And as was suggested by my colleague from St. John's Mount Pearl, there's some question as to the efficacy of those measures, those conservation measures, management measures, to in fact control how nations prosecute the fishery. Nonetheless, here in this country, the commercial wild capture fisheries, aquaculture, and fish and seafood processing contributes upwards of $5.4 billion in total GDP, 71,000 of full-time equivalent employment to the country's economy. It's a big deal, Mr. Speaker, and we must do our utmost to work on this issue. We've indicated our support for the measures provided in Bill S-3 because they are part of an international agreement, and we think that that Canada should be a player in establishing those rules and regulations on the international stage, and something that's so important as the fishery. Some of us would like to see the government of Canada take a much more aggressive role, that we would be much more involved, much more heavily engaged, and in fact taking a leadership role on this. My colleague from the Western Arctic talked about the problem in the Arctic with the Arctic donut, and that is a real problem. It's an area that is unregulated by international agreements, and some foreign nations are beginning to go into that area and to fish at will. They are setting up historical fishing patterns that will have an impact when there is some kind of an international agreement that affects that particular area. Canada has not played a role there, and we are going to. I would suggest we're going to suffer. We're going to suffer as a result of that. But let me talk for a few moments about what the Port State Measures Agreement, the international agreement to which Canada is a signatory, and to which Bill S-3 will, when it passed, will cement. As described, it says the agreement aims to prevent illegally caught fish from entering international markets through ports. Under the terms of the treaty, foreign vessels will provide advance notice and request permission for port entry. Countries will conduct regular inspections in accordance with universal minimum standards. Offending vessels will be denied use of port or certain port services, and information sharing networks will be created. It's the first global treaty focused specifically on the problem of illegal and unreported and unregulated fishing. And, Mr. Speaker, as I indicated, I believe, and I missed the comment from the Parliamentary Secretary earlier, but I understand there may be up to a dozen nations that have signed on, but it's important to understand that there needs to be 25 nations that sign on to this and that ratify it through legislation like we have in order for it to come into effect. S-3 provides regulatory power for authorizing foreign fishing vessels ordered to port by their flag state to enter Canadian waters to verify compliance with law or conservation and management measures of fisheries management organization. The bill expands the definition of fishing vessel. We've heard that to include any vessels used in the transshipping of fish or marine plants that have not been previously handled. The bill expands on the current definition of fish, which includes shellfish, crustacean, marine mammals to include any part of the derivatives. Now, some of those issues we're going to talk more about in committee, because we have some, on this side, we have some issue about the process to which our Canada and our officials are going to be able to, what authority they in fact will have to be able to carry out those inspections. It appears that they will need to get a court order, a warrant, in order to be able to move in to inspect the contents of, in this case, it could be a ship, it could be a plane, it could be a warehouse, it could be whatever. Any vehicle or any structure that's used in the transshipment of fish or fish products is allowed, but the question is, how will that look? How will that happen? What are the provisions and what are the authorities that will be allowed? We need to understand that better. And Mr. Speaker, as I indicated, there's another part of that, and that is that the bill adds a number of new provisions under which a justice may hear applications, including for a search warrant authorizing a protection order, a protection officer to seize something, or a forfeiture order. We'll want to seek some clarification of that. We'll do that at committee. We've on this side of the House, and certainly this is a commitment that we've seen from the Leader of the Opposition as a result of his experience on environmental issues. He understands how important ocean health, the ecosystem of our ocean, in terms of how the prosecution of the fishery is conducted, what that means to the overall health of our planet, the overall health of our environment. He understands that, and you've heard members on this side, as they've intervened in this debate, raising issues about this government's commitment on issues like conservation, on issues like habitat management, on issues like on questions of science, for example. And when I look at the added responsibilities in this bill to officers under the responsibility of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Mr. Speaker, I wonder how they're going to be able to carry out these added responsibilities because of the cuts that we've seen to the staff under over the past 3 years under this government. We've seen hundreds of millions of dollars cut out of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. We've seen a reduction in the number of vessels that are available to the department and to officers to be able to carry out surveillance, to be able to apprehend. The ability of our coastal agencies, of our Navy to be able to help out, Coast Guard to be able to intervene, Mr. Speaker, is certainly questioned as a result of the damaging cuts that this government has made. And likewise, as I talk about the government's commitment to ecosystem, to fisheries management measures, and to enforcing those issues, we've seen not only cuts to the inspection staff, to the rules with respect to the legislation and the regulations in terms of what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate in terms of things that can be conducted on a lake, on a river, and on the ocean, and the impact that it will have on the fishery and on the ecosystem, Mr. Speaker. These are things that this government has done. These are things that this government has done over the past 3 years, which will have a detrimental impact on our ability to maintain a sustainable fishery on all our coasts. The ability of these fisheries and the people that prosecute these fisheries to be able to do so in a way that is not only safe and healthy, but to make sure that their families and their communities are able to prosper not only now, but well into the future. And that's what the whole idea of a sustainable fishery is. And you heard members here talk about what's happening with respect to northern shrimp. Happened last spring. The fact that this government weighed in on the side of the corporate fishery, in particular on the side of the big factory trawlers, against the small fishery, the coastal fishery, the community fishery, Mr. Speaker, and the result will be and has been already the loss of hundreds of jobs, not only in the small boat fishery, but also in the processing that goes along with that in a number of communities throughout northern Newfoundland and the south coast of Labrador. So that's why some of us are raising questions and asking questions and raising some concerns about this government's actual commitment towards the fishery, towards making sure that we have a sustainable fishery, that we do everything in our power to protect the environment, to make sure that not only within our purview, within the area where Canada and the Canadian government has an impact, not only that we do everything we can to protect those grounds, to protect that fishery, to protect those oceans, to make sure that we do things that are healthy and that will ensure there's a sustainable fishery, but that this government participates actively and in a leadership capacity in those international bodies that sets regulations, conservation, and other management measures, quotas and bycatch limits to ensure that not only are we managing the fishery properly within Canada, but that internationally we are doing everything we can to ensure that fishing is sustainable, and that we don't end up losing, as a result of overfishing and bad management, that we don't end up continuing to drive species out of existence. That's happening far too often already, Mr. Speaker, and it's something that we need to do a better job. We need to better job on. So let me just reiterate a couple of points that I wanted to make about S-3. I'm disappointed the way the government introduced these provisions. This was an agreement. This international agreement was signed on by Canada in 2010. Here we are in 2014, and we're still dealing with the legislation. Why is that? Well, the government first introduced the bill not through the House of Commons, not through the front door, but through the back door. They came in through the Senate. The Senate dealt with it in the spring of 2013, and then that bill ended up dying on the table because the government prorogued the House in the fall of 2013, Mr. Speaker. So again, the point I was making there is that it does not give one a sense that this government understands the urgency of this problem and is going to move quickly to deal with the issue. The whole question of the illegal, unreported and unregulated fishery is a big problem. It's a serious problem. Canada needs to be, I believe, at the forefront of measures like this to try to ensure that this agreement that was signed is ratified by at least 25 nations, that we get the job done, and then the government puts the resources forward to ensure that we can properly enforce the agreement and do everything we can within the powers of our country and of Canadians to make sure that we're doing our part to stop the illegal, unreported, unregulated fishery. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? L'honorable député.
The honorable member. I'm sorry.